Good afternoon. Yeah, so one person I spoke with out here says that when they got here a few months ago, there were only about 4 tents in this area. And now look at this. Look at how much need there is in this area. And I'm told some of these people go to work and still have found themselves in this situation, just unable to pay for housing and simply didn't have anyone to turn to for help.
Our families are suffering. Children out here are suffering.
Although homelessness has been a problem long before the pandemic, the financial toll has made it more visible.
We need help.
Katrina Carter says she used to live in a tent here in Uptown and that the stigma that these people want to live like this isn't there.
You have to be in our shoes. Everybody wasn't born with a gold-handled spoon in their mouth. We didn't ask for this.
Carter says for some, it was a matter of falling on hard times and having no one to catch them.
But a lot of us got put in situations that we had to come out here. We didn't want it.
And one woman who lives in a tent now says people don't seem to have empathy for it.
I had a guy drive up and told me to go to work. How can I go to work? I can't. I'm disabled.
I think that is the prevailing view. In fact, before I started running Charlotte's winter shelter, I thought the same thing.
Joel Siegel, who's now the executive director of the organization Housing and Dignity for All, says some people living in tents do work.
As people out here, they go to work, they wake up early in the morning, and this is what they have to come back to.
How can these people become upwardly mobile if there's no housing?
Siegel says the number of homeless people has only grown since the pandemic started and that the community and its leaders should not be okay with this as the only alternative.
This is a needless tragedy that can be dealt with.
Again, I'm told it's just so much worse for people now that the temperatures have started to drop. So if you'd like to help, we'll put some of the most needed items on our website, WCNC.com. For now, here in Charlotte, I'm Lana Harris, WCNC Charlotte.
Peace. Welcome to another episode of MFD News, Man's Final Dominion News. I'm your host, AsaYHWH Ben Yisrael, the Iconoclast, and we have a few stories to go over in this episode. We have headlines such as homeless cities are popping up all across the country, all across the nation. Homelessness is on the rise. Americans are dumpster diving for food in their time of crisis. We have more news on the Texas chill, the Texas freeze. We're getting reports that electricity power bills are drastically and dramatically increasing. We're getting reports of figures in the heights of $17,000 for 1 month's worth of electricity. We'll be reporting on that. We have more stories, more reports of deaths that took place during the freeze. We have corrections on the propaganda saying that frozen windmills or frozen wind turbines were the cause of the blackouts and the loss of power in Texas. We have talks of the approaching apocalypse. We go behind the curtain and analyze through the lens, right, of the scriptures what's really going on with the Texas freeze, the Texas chill. We're going to talk about Australia versus Facebook and round 2, Canada versus Facebook. We have economic crisis, economic collapse news. Unemployment claims are up and they're not going down. We have stimulus talk, a bit of financial advice to those that have ears to hear, eyes to see. And in world news, we have the seeming assassination of a Italian ambassador in the Congos. All right, so first let's discuss the plagues and the judgments that are falling on the nation of the United States of America. A systematic destruction is taking place. Yah of hosts is judging this nation for its wickedness. It is described as the daughter of Babylon. This nation is supposed to be the richest nation on the face of the earth, the most democratic nation on the face of the earth. There's supposed to be freedoms and liberties. There's supposed to be peace and prosperity. But is that what we see? Or are people waking up to the fact that the American dream is really the American nightmare? In this first headline, it says Portland cops guard Fred Meyer dumpsters as scavengers rummage through mountains of food thrown out after freezers fail. 100,000 Oregonians still have no power after Storm Uri wreaks worst havoc in 40 years. So you have Gentiles, Caucasian Gentiles, rummaging through a dumpster full of discarded food from Fred Meyer's after Fred Meyer's freezer failed. And there are 100,000 Oregonians that don't have power still. Now, the question has to be asked, who notified these people that there was a dumpster full of freebies? Who notified the people? Don't you think it was someone on the inside? But this led to police being sent to guard the dumpster full of discarded food. So the police are guarding the trash now. Huh? Okay. Around 14 cops descended on the Hollywood West Fred Meyer store in Northeast Portland, Oregon, Tuesday. 14 officers, suited and booted, guns on their waists, ready to shoot you in your face if you should attempt to get some of this delicious discarded food. This is your tax dollars at work. The police, they threatened to arrest a group of around 20 residents and activists who were trying to salvage wasted food. The group said they were trying to take the produce to people at emergency weather shelters. No, they weren't. They weren't trying to take the food to people at emergency weather shelters. They were trying to take the food for themselves. Just let's be honest about it. I mean, is that the best excuse you could come up with? Fred Meyer said the food, which included everything from lobster tails to cheese, was no longer safe to eat. Some Portland residents have been left to survive without power for a week, leaving perishable food spoiling in their refrigerators and freezers after Storm Uri pummeled the U.S. As of Thursday, 106,000 Oregonians were still without power, with officials warning power system damage was the worst seen in 40 years. Okay, now just take a look at this. They have the police out there guarding, look, the dumpster full of discarded food from Fred Meyer's because their freezer wasn't working, right? So people are out there masked up, right? They all got their masks on. They even scavenging with the masks. And look, they got their shrimp, they nasty sea roaches, some juices and some hot dogs and other things that were discarded. Mountains of food, it looks like, discarded food. And the police came in and shut it down. Barbara Smith Warner says, this is the definition of wrong priorities. Yeah, I know you can do better. Please use an emergency spoilage plan instead of misusing police. Jenny Yang says they are using armed guards to protect a dumpster of perfectly good food. This is not the America we should live in. Our priorities are completely backwards. The real trash in this situation is at Fred Meyer. Yeah. So society's breaking down. Everything is collapsing. The apocalypse is upon us. But people are still doing things like this. People still think that this stuff is interesting. People still think that this is clean and okay to eat. They show it off. their wickedness, their lack of knowledge. You're not supposed to eat chicken. It's unclean. It's unhealthy. You're not supposed to eat chicken. Society's collapsing. Nuclear annihilation around the corner. This is what this is about. Oh, man. Look at this. And this is why what's happening is happening.
You're a bad son, right?
This is why
And you see your mom sleeping.
everyone
Do.
is going to die. Yeah! All right, moving right along. We have tent cities popping up all over the place. People are losing their homes, becoming homeless, even with the rent moratorium. So we have this headline: the tents are gone, the need remains. 200 plus people moved from Charlotte homeless camp. So they're shutting it down as well. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden the people are supposed to not be homeless anymore. Just because you shut down the homeless camp doesn't mean that the people are no longer homeless, okay? We have also Denver wants the police to be less involved in calls about the city's homeless encampments. So it's going on in Denver as well. Non-emergency calls to 911 will be routed to mental health or homeless outreach professionals. Denver wants to see fewer cops and more social workers and behavioral health specialists showing up to calls about homeless encampments. So they want to send social workers and are professionals and skilled in the behavioral health field out to inspect the homeless encampments. And they're saying over the next few weeks, the city will begin redirecting non-emergency calls made to 911 about unsanctioned encampments in Denver to the city's 311 helpline instead. So if people call about the homeless encampments, the homeless cities, they're going to be redirected to 311 so a social worker or a behavioral health specialist can be sent out. Okay, they're like, don't bother us with, hey, we don't have time to go out and be checking on the homeless every minute. Stop calling us. We got other things to do, like give y'all tickets. The homeless don't have any money. We can't extract any blood from them unless it's to evict them from where they're, currently residing. This next headline says, looking to get around court rulings on homelessness, Washington cities may offer shelter, then crack down. So they're planning on offering shelter, then cracking down. Okay. So the bill introduced by Senator Phil Fortunato would have required every county and each city in Washington with more than 50,000 people to have a shelter bed for every person living outside. The whole state had roughly 9,600 emergency shelter beds in 2019. That year, there were more than 21,000 homeless people statewide. While adding homeless shelters throughout the state is usually a popular idea, this bill drew such ire because those extra beds were intended to allow police to approach homeless people living outside on public property, offer them one of those shelter spots, and tell the person to move on or face arrest if the person declines. So it sounds like they're doing it to lock up the homeless because they don't even have enough beds. If the whole state only has 9,600 emergency shelter beds, but there are 21,000 homeless people, how can the police be offering beds to these homeless people? And then when they say no, they tell them to move on or they arrest them. Welcome to the totalitarian state. Now, on to dark winter, the Texas freeze, the Texas chill. It's being reported that in the midst of this crisis, people are receiving bills in the tens of thousands. One headline reads, How in the world can anyone pay that? Some seeing electric bills as high as $17K in wake of Texas winter storm. $17,000 for electricity. And why? Because if you were on a variable or indexed plan, your rate and therefore your electric bill may have skyrocketed. That's why you don't get variable or index plans. That's why you get fixed. Don't let them fool you with that fast talk. Out of Dallas, the Texas power outage has become the Texas power outrage. Electricity supply and demand in Texas has really stabilized now, but when it was grossly out of whack over the past several days, the cost of power in the wholesale market went crazy. It went from about $50 per megawatt to $9,000. You hear that? That didn't affect many retail customers because they were on a fixed rate plan. But if you were on a variable or index plan, your rate and therefore your electric bill may have skyrocketed. One customer messaged us, quote, "Mine is over $1,000, not sure how. 700 square foot apartment I have been keeping at 60 degrees, end quote. Another couple tweeted at us, quote, "Using as little as possible, 1,300 square feet house, and this is my bill. How is this fair? I only paid $1,200 for the whole 2020. The tweet was accompanied by a screenshot of their bill, which now stands at $3,801. Then I spoke with a guy named Ty Williams. He sent screenshots of his 3 electric meters, one for his home, one for his guest house, and one for his office. Last month, his bill for all 3 was $660. So far, this month's electricity, he owes more than $17,000. Williams wondered, quote, "How in the world can anyone pay that? I mean, you go from a couple $100s a month. There's absolutely no way. It makes no sense." So you see the havoc and the financial cost that a bit of snow and freezing temperatures had in Texas. Another headline reads, "As Texas deep freeze subsides, some households now face electricity bills as high as $10,000. So we got 10,000, 17,000. We're also getting reports that Texas was, quote, seconds and minutes away from catastrophic months-long blackouts, officials say. Officials with the ERCOT officials of Texas said that grid operators implemented blackouts to avoid a catastrophic failure that could have left Texans in the dark for months. Along with the 4 or 5 million that were out of power for however many days, apparently the Texas power grid was seconds and minutes away from catastrophic failure, and this consequently would have left Texans in the dark for months. Maybe that's why this person, Tyler Durton, wonders, is the temporary collapse of Texas foreshadowing the total collapse of the United States? We are getting a very short preview of what will eventually happen to the United States as a whole. America's infrastructure is aging and crumbling. Our power grids were never intended to support so many people. Our water systems are a complete joke, and it has become utterly apparent that we would be completely lost if a major long-term national emergency ever struck. Texas has immense wealth and vast energy resources, but now it is being called a failed state. If it can't even handle a few days of cold weather, what is the rest of America going to look like when things really start to get chaotic in this country? So everyone knows. They know that it's on the way. Are you prepared for it? Or are you busy partying? Are you busy worrying about the latest car? It's going to be like Mad Max out here pretty soon. Are you prepared for that? Are you preparing for that? In other news, segue into a deconstruction of the crisis in Texas. This headline reads, "No, frozen wind turbines aren't the main culprit for Texas power outages." No, they aren't. And that's a lie if that's what you're hearing, because wind turbines only make up about 4% of the power supply for Texas. So 4% of the power supply being frozen or doesn't produce the main culprit for the power outages. But that's just a segue into behind the scenes. Ted Cruz takes a flight to Cancun in the midst of the crisis, and his director of communications issued a statement.
Yes, Senator Cruz is in Cancun right now. But here at his offices, we say big whoop. Senator Cruz deserves to relax, unwind, unplug, recharge, like you would a power outlet. Or his power grid's going to go out, and we can't be having that. That's too important. So he's got to take care of his light, which comes from the inside. And it's just like, why can't he have his eat, pray, love moment like everybody else can? It's just funny to me. It's funny that whenever he's here in America and he's doing his little jokes on Twitter, everybody says, "Go away, Ted, we hate you." But then when he goes away to Cancun, everybody says, "Well, where's Ted? Why isn't he doing his little jokes on Twitter?" Now, sometimes you just don't know what you got till it's gone, and that should be a lesson for the Americans wondering where Senator Ted Cruz is at this morning.
So this birdhead says that Senator Cruz is basically entitled to his vacation. The people should be happy for him taking that vacation. And she doesn't know why everyone's so upset. We're going to miss him when he's gone. This clueless liberal female here has no concept of timing. She doesn't see anything wrong with Senator Ted Cruz going on vacation in the midst of a crisis. Nothing wrong with that at all. That's white privilege 101 for you right there. Now check this out. The GOP runs on money. They get their money by selling privileges to corporations. In Texas, that meant privatizing energy supplies. So they have a privatized energy grid that's separate from some Texans have been running up gas bills of $500 a day under new pricing regimes approved by GOP regulators, paid off by fake utility companies that are shells for overseas criminal cartels. Edomites at it again. Some are looking at Goldman Sachs, where Hyde Cruz, Ted's wife, works. Sachs owns some of the Texas companies like Energy Future Holdings that made millions in the not-so-accidental gas price ripoff hidden behind the not-so-accidental utility shutoff blamed not-so-accidentally on wind power by corrupt Greg Abbott. So names are being named. Who is funded by the companies that have made so much on the debts of so many, just like the Trump family has on COVID. So again, there's a larger story behind it. Many of the powerful companies that run Texas are owned by the Gulf Cartel, who with the Sinaloa Cartel runs organized crime in the red states. These are allegations. Someone should look into this. Past that, it is all run by companies that do business with China, primarily gambling operations. China gave a special license for both gambling and totally supervised prostitution to the former Portuguese colony of Macau, which is run by the Adelson gambling operation and Benjamin Netanyahu. Ding, 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 Edomite. Edomite. Edomites, man, all the time. This organization, a front for the Chinese communists, is the biggest single funder of the GOP in Texas, the Grand Old Party. It is also Trump's biggest backer. No wonder Ivanka has had such tremendous business success in China. After all, they own the GOP, and this is totally true. No wonder you hear them say China runs Biden, Joe Obama. So that's the Edomites at work, the hidden hand. Now, in other news concerning the Edomites, right, this Edomite Zuckerberg that runs Facebook. Now we have Facebook versus Australia, or Australia versus Facebook. Facebook is now blocking all of the news from the platform in Australia over the government's plan to force them to pay the publishers. So the headline reads, Facebook blocks news in Australia over government plan to force payment to publishers. Facebook said Wednesday that it is preventing people inside Australia from accessing news stories on its platform. In addition, Facebook users elsewhere will not be able to view or share stories from Australian outlets. The moves are a response to proposed legislation that would force social media platforms to pay Australian news organizations for links shared on its site. So we have social media facing off against mainstream media. And Facebook just said, okay, well, we'll just shut everything down. Shut down all the news. No more no more news stories. Okay, so Facebook has no problem censoring and shutting you down, okay? It's their platform, it's their company, right? So that was the flaw in the allowance and in how corporations are allowed to operate. They are allowed to operate outside of the laws and outside of the Constitution. Individuals cannot operate outside of those laws, but corporations can. And that is the fundamental flaw. Canada is also seeming as if they're going to be throwing their hat in the ring. Who's next? Canada joins Australia's anti-Facebook crusade, vows to make social media pay for news. So next, Facebook might take all the news down from Canada. They shut Trump down. They done shut Australia down a little bit, you know what I mean? And you think they have a problem with Canada? Facebook is like, it's a monster. It's out of control. In the economic news, we have another 861,000 Americans filed new unemployment claims. 861,000 Americans. Things aren't getting any better. They're getting worse. Now, there are a bunch of people waiting on this Biden stimulus check. But as one economist said, if you're waiting on or you're dependent on a $1,400 stimulus check, you're in a whole lot of trouble. So this headline says, the Biden stimulus plan moved forward today. Here are the biggest parts of it. Direct payments, state and local government aid, and pandemic jobless benefit boosts make up more than $1 trillion of package. Direct payments to households. They have aid to state, local, and tribal governments for $350 billion. They say pandemic-related unemployment benefit provisions for $245 billion. 3 pandemic-related unemployment assistance programs, a $400 a week federal add-on to benefit checks, extended federal benefits for those who have exhausted state benefits, and a program for jobless benefits for gig economy workers would be extended. They said there's aid to reopen schools, and they said that's $128 billion. Child tax credit expansion, $109.2 billion. There's a multi-employer pension plan aid for $81.5 billion. There's a minimum wage increase, and that's $45.4 billion. Then they have FEMA, and that's $47 billion. Coronavirus testing, $48.5 billion, and aid for metro transit systems, $27.9 billion. That is what makes up the $1.9 trillion price tag. All right, if they say so. I'm not going to hang my hat on that. This is just a word of advice. If you have eyes to see and ears to hear, and if you have assets and you want to protect them, you should invest in precious metals, silver and gold. If you leave your money in the banks, it loses its purchasing power. If you leave it in the stock market, you will lose it with the coming collapse. If you leave it in Bitcoin, you have nothing. Fiat. Digital fiat. And like they say, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. In Texas, I'm sure there were people that had Bitcoin. Did they have access to their Bitcoin with no power? No. Bitcoin is reliant on electricity. It's not a smart choice. And finally, in international news, we have the shocking photos of the Italian ambassador who was killed. Rome's prosecutor opens investigation for terrorism. According to the latest media reconstruction, the convoy, consisting of 2 World Food Program cars, were traveling north on the road between Goma and Rutshuru, where the Italian diplomat was supposed to visit a school food distribution program of the UN agency just awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The Jeep with the ambassador on board was blocked by attackers with automatic rifles, probably the Kalashnikovs, of which terrorists and guerrillas make extensive use in Africa. The Congolese driver was killed immediately, while the automatic officer and the Italian soldier were taken to the forest and then killed in cold blood. It would have been a real execution in the style of ISIS cutthroats, which, as explained in the previous article, have become very dangerous in recent months. Evidence of the armed attack can also be seen from the damage to the vehicle visible in some dramatic images from the Congo. So here you have the dead body, the lifeless body of the ambassador to Italy, the Italian ambassador. In one of them, instead, we see the now lifeless ambassador carried away by the first rescuers who arrived on the spot. North Kivu has been one of the most dangerous and problematic areas in the entire African country for decades. The region is very rich in raw materials and infested by more than 100 irregular formations that through violence tried to get their hands on the mineral deposits and timber trade. This Italian ambassador was a casualty of war, perhaps you would say. He was collateral damage. They're attempting to pin the blame on ISIS in the area. You take that with a grain of salt. The weather forecast is gloom and doom. We are in trouble. This nation, the daughter of Babylon, United States of America, is being judged by Yah Almighty for its sins, its wickedness, its transgressions, its pride, its arrogance, its greed, its violence, murder, pillage, rape, theft, sorceries, witchcrafts, enchantments, abominations, harlotries. This nation is being judged. The judgment will only hasten. It will only pick up speed. Prepare yourself. Tell your loved ones. Do not carry on like things are going to get back to normal. There is no back to normal. This has been the Iconoclast, AsaYHWH Ben Yisrael, with Man's Final Dominion News. Peace.